In this unit, we begin to look at inherent features of nouns and noun phrases by first examining the principles of noun classification. Almost all languages have some grammatical means of dividing up their noun lexicon into distinct classes. However, in many languages, this distinction may be quite purely lexical or semi-lexical, where in others the distinction is derivational or with contextual features. Systems of nominal classification have been typically determined by their subtypes arranged along a typological continuum that ranges from lexical class and measure terms from classifiers to numeral classifiers. And this also includes grammatical gender. We shall begin our discussion by looking at grammatical gender, which we shall call noun class, so as to be able to allow for the properties that are truly descriptive of the languages of the world. Noun class is a system of obligatory noun classification, wherein each noun of the language is classified into one of a set of limited classes. In the traditional literature, this is often referred to as grammatical gender. But the term noun class to label this feature is necessary because noun classes may in fact range from as small as 2 to up to 16, and indeed even 18, as we can see from the languages Swahili and Zulu. In some languages, there is a marker of class on every noun. In others, none or a few classes only. Usually, there is no semantic basis that can uniformly describe the grouping into noun classes that cuts across all the classes a language has, but a number of classes can be semantically determined. A simple system is the kind of system that one has in Tamil, where it has 2 noun classes. Class 1 contains humans, gods and demons, that are so-called rational nouns, and class 2 includes all other so-called irrational nouns. A complex system for which there can seems to be no semantic basis is a language like Hindi, which also has 2 classes. But its description of which noun goes into which class is something that cannot be determined either by reference to semantic basis or morphology or phonology. For example, it might seem that one can say that R ending nouns in Hindi belong to the noun class which we traditionally label as masculine, E ending nouns belong to the feminine class. However, the existence of pani, which is an E ending noun, but nevertheless has a masculine classification, suggests that looking for a basis which explains the description and division of all nouns of Hindi into 2 distinct classes cannot lie in just the phonetics/phonology. In all noun class languages, there is some constituent of the noun phrase outside itself must agree in class with it, along with number and gender, so the agreement is not exclusively for class. In other words, noun class defines agreement classes and is therefore its most syntactic feature. As a consequence, noun class is always easy to detect, because whether there is a semantic basis or not, there is a morphological classification which shows up both in inherent features and in contextual features. Hindi is one such a language, which we've already seen. The phonetic and phonological expression of nouns is not reliable. However, the agreement morphology on Hindi verbs, Hindi adjectives and other constituents of the noun phrase show us very clearly that there are only 2 classes along which agreement can take place. It is important to note that using to be able to detect noun class, it is making reference only to biological sex is not an easy it's not an easy matter and should not be used as a reliable criterion. Many languages have special agreements for masculine and feminine nouns when they refer to biological sex. However, this reference to biological sex does not imply that all nouns have been typologized into a language. So when you are looking for noun class, it is essential to look at inanimate nouns. Moreover, a close consideration of the languages that have grammatical gender or noun class indicates that it's not the case that biological sex uniformly maps onto the corresponding grammatical gender. For example, in a language like Konkani, which has a three-way noun class system, wife is referred to in the neuter gender, whereas girl or woman is assigned into the feminine gender. This is also true in German, except where maidens or young girls are not assigned feminine gender. Hindi, on the other hand, is extremely regular. Something which is biologically feminine is always assigned the feminine gender, and biologically masculine is assigned the masculine gender. In all languages that have noun class, these features typically occur fused with other grammatical features, such as number and case. A good example of this is Hindi, in which noun class is found with portmanteau morphs with oblique case in the context of an adposition. In the noun ladka, a indicates masculine gender but also marks singular and also marks nominative. Ladke, in the context of an adposition such as in ladke ko, marks the a morpheme, marks both oblique case and continues to preserve masculine singular and masculine singular. So the a morpheme is then a fused morpheme signifying number, case and noun class. A final aspect of a noun class system to be noted is that there is almost no speaker and register variation in the assignment of these. So while it's true that many closely related languages can assign different genders to particular nominals. So some varieties of Hindi consider dhol, that is drum, to be of masculine gender. Other languages other varieties of Hindi might consider it to have a feminine gender. However, within a speaker or within a register or across registers, speakers rarely do different gender assignments. The only exception seems to be humor, which would dwell on the fact that the noun is assigned a particular gender in the ordinary grammar and then is being assigned a different gender for humorous purposes. So once a speech community fixes the gender, then that is the gender that is assigned. So noun class languages represent a arrangement of the nominal lexicon in terms into rigid and really non-mobile and non-variable classes. Another form of noun classification is a little more flexible, which is called a noun classifier language. Examples of these languages include Mundari, Angami, etc., which show a lexico-grammatical system of noun classification by use of bound morphemes/words used along with the noun. Whereas noun classification in terms of noun class is revealed through agreement in gender relations, classifiers of the noun classifier variety are usually independent words, and in the language can occur as a independent lexeme and have a generic semantics. And these are essentially independent of any other element in the noun phrase or in a clause. In many noun classifiers languages, class distinctions are made along the lines of humans, body parts, flora, fauna, natural objects, artifacts, food, whether the food is flesh or vegetable, portability, what things that can be drunk and cannot be drunk, as well as social relations, particularly kinship, and other important social, cultural important concepts. The noun classifiers typically establish a generic specific semantic relationship in which the referential noun denotes a generic type and the meaning of the noun classifier limits the generic reference to a specific class. When it occurs, noun classifiers are typically bound morphemes. A good example of a noun classifier system would be Angami, given in the unit, where depending on which kind of noun it is in terms of domestication, the derivational morpheme, as we would traditionally analyze it, varies. For example, the female bison has a different morpheme from to indicate that it is female as compared to the she goat. There are a number of contentious issues with regards to the identification of languages that have a noun class feature. The grammar of Angami indicates that we really have a broad typologization of noun classes with a fundamental cut between animate and inanimate entities. It is the animate entities which seem to be organized into a number of classes. Inanimate entities are just treated as one whole group. Within the animates, we have a distinction between human nouns and non-human nouns, where in non-human nouns, there's a distinction between three classes: feminine, masculine, and common. Masculine nouns carry additional morphology to tell you whether this is a wild quadruped, whether it is a bird, aquatic creatures, and versus domestic quadruped. One may ask as whether this system is very different from English, where in English also Clarke's terms, where berry denoting terms are almost always compounded with the word berry. So strawberry, raspberry, blueberry. Separate words are used as class terms in English as well. For example, the word tree is used to signify membership of the class of trees. There is considerable debate in the literature as to whether the existence of class terms in itself is enough to identify a language as a noun classifier language. Because by that token, any language which has any system of noun classification at all will have to be classified as such. In my opinion, the safest criterion to use is one, while incorporating the notion of noun classifier, is that it enables us to arrive at better generalizations of the morphology and the morphosyntax of the language concerned. By this criterion, we would be justified in positing Angami as a noun classifier language, because only if we find that the morphosyntax or the morphology of the language makes reference to this feature. From what we currently know about Angami, this does not seem to be the case. So at this, I would advocate that we do not consider any language which does not satisfy this basic criterion not to be considered a non-classifier language. Moving on from Angami, let us look at what seems to be a very good example as to what should be considered a non-classifier language. This is the work of a recent that arises from a recent grammar of the Great Andamanese language by Anvita Abbi. Abbi, the present, what Abbi labels the present Great Andamanese language, given that there were 4 or 5 speakers left of the language when she investigated it. She argues for the identification of what are the body division markers as noun classifiers, because they play a significant role in word formation processes as grammaticalized units, and they can attach to a huge number of vocabulary items signifying diverse meaning. Abbi identifies 7 such body division classes of nouns. So, this system is based on the partonomy of the human body. So, any word which is associated with mouth and its semantic extensions receives a particular morpheme. Something which is associated with major external body parts receives another. Some things which denote the extreme ends of the body receives another. Bodily products and part-whole relationships receive yet another morpheme. Organs inside the body receive yet another morpheme. And the last 2 classes are parts designating round shape or sexual organs, and parts for legs in related terms. In present Great Andamanese, these body division noun classifiers are prefixed onto a nominal referent to indicate various locations of that referent on the body. So, using the criteria that we've used to describe the way that noun classification works, they actually encode generic to specific semantics. Okay. For example, day blood can be prefixed with any of the class of markers to indicate its source. If it gets class 5, which then it denotes blood inside the body. If day gets prefixed with oath, which is class 4, right, it means blood outside the body. If you have it prefixed with class 3, then you get blood on the finger or from the finger. And if you prefix it with class 2, then it means blood from the head. If we were to posit these prefixes as derivational morphemes rather than noun classifiers, then perhaps we could describe this fragment of data, but then would be losing the link that this is a highly productive process, because this system also occurs in the context of inalienable possessions. In such contexts, the noun classifiers are obligatory. So if you want to say my back, then you have to prefix back with the class marker for the body division part. So, and if you want to say my tongue, you have to prefix it with the class marker that is relevant for that body division part, etc. Interestingly, the present Great Andamanese facts do not suggest that these are relevant for agreement classes. There is no agreement at all on verbs for these class markers, though other class markers do exist. Andamanese then is a case for using, for setting up noun classifier as an independent category when it has really system-wide effects. A third kind of classification, which is very familiar to the speakers of many of the major languages of India, such as Bangla and Assamese, is a numeral classifier system. Numeral classifier languages closely resemble noun classifier language, in that the system doesn't classify every noun into one or the other classes, and many nouns do not appear with a classifier at all. Recall the case of Angami or a present Great Andamanese, when something does not relate to a body part, there will be no noun class marker on it. Okay. It's also not the case that every noun that must occur with a classifier must occur with a classifier. as nouns can surface without the classifier itself as well. For example, mass nouns in the Tani language Tagin are never marked with classifiers, only count nouns are. Numeral classifier languages, on the other hand, are distinct from noun classifier languages because whenever there is a numeral, then the classifier must appear in a position strictly adjacent to the numeral. Either it can precede or follow, depending on the language. Numeral classifiers have been traditionally distinguished into two types: sortal classifiers and mensural classifiers. A sortal classifier is one that individuates whatever it refers to in terms of the kind of entity that it is. Sortal classifiers typically class nouns, therefore, by their salient semantic properties, whether it is human or animate, whether it is round, long, thin, fat, made of wood, or what they are used for. The reference here is to linguistic properties rather than the actual physical use of the referent. For example, if a language uses a classifier signaling round objects with the word ball, then that same classifier will have to be used when the ball is square. The Bangla classifiers Jon and Khana are examples of sortal and mensural classifiers, respectively. Jon can be only used with humans and not with any other entities, whereas the Khana classifier is a measure word which can be used with any inanimate count noun that may have individual parts or may be conceived of as a piece in itself. So you can say do Jon chile. You cannot drop the classifier in this. However, you can say do khana roti, which is 2 pieces of roti, or you can say do khana deem, which is 2 eggs. So mensural classifiers arise in the context of countability and measuring. And a bare numeral in such cases is always disallowed. Cheng and Sebesma distinguish mensural classifiers from sortal classifiers by using the term count classifier or massifier. According to them, the crucial distinction between sortal and mensural classifiers is with regards to individuations. While count classifiers single out one countable discrete unit, massifier or mensural classifiers do not pick out discrete units. That is, they do not individuate, and such classifiers are non-individual classifiers. Because even though there is a classifier, they say, we are still left a mass. As a consequence, massifiers create a measure for counting, and count classifiers simply name the unit of natural semantic partitioning. Massifiers and classifiers must be distinguished from measure phrases and collective nouns, which actually abound cross-linguistically. Just the fact that collective nouns are used in a lexically specific way, for example, you say a stack of books, a flock of birds, does not make these expressions numeral classifiers or massifiers, because the selection relation between the collective noun and a collective term and the noun is not syntactic and does not impact on grammaticality. In languages with genuine massifier, the non-use of a massifier or a classifier will result in ungrammaticality. Taking, for example, a language like Hindi. Hindi has a particular syntax for measure phrases. So you can say do glass pani, 2 glass water, and compare this with do pani ke glass, which is 2 water glasses. Only the first is a unit of measure, and in the unit of measure, the unit of measure must appear adjacent to a numeral. So when you say do pani ke glass, it doesn't have the reference of unit of measure. It would therefore be wrong to conclude that this indicates that Hindi is a noun classifier language, because this language does not have count classifiers at all. Right? It seems therefore that to be able to convincingly label a noun classifier language, it having count classifiers is absolutely essential. We must make special allowances therefore for the syntax of measure phrases, because this syntax might represent something similar to the syntax of massifiers and measure phrases, but this is not enough in itself to label a language as a noun classifier language. So the takeaway that we must do from here is that true classifiers are overt expressions of unit counting of individual nouns. Any language that lacks this cannot be counted as a noun classifier language. We also need to understand that classifiers impose a semantic classification of nouns. They occur in terms of their salient properties. Finally, classifiers function as an individualizer of nominal head that is indeterminate for number. So the existence of number morphology may quite naturally preclude the existence of a noun classifying system.